Chief xenobiologist Zaxtal pressed her sensory appendages against the observation window, watching the human delegation with growing unease. Her superior had ordered her to study these new creatures, but everything about them defied conventional classification. They were neither prey nor apex predator, neither purely rational nor purely instinctual. They were something else entirely. The three humans below moved through the botanical gardens with a grace that seemed at odds with their rigid endoskeletal structure. They stopped to admire the crystalline flowers of Rigel vi, and Zaxtal observed as one of them. Dr. Sarah Chen, according to the records, reached out to touch a petal with remarkable gentleness. Fascinating creatures, aren't they? The voice belonged to Grand Arbiter Velox, who had materialized beside her viewing station. His chitinous plates shifted in what passed for amusement among his kind. Disturbing is more accurate, Zaxtal replied, her chromatophores flickering with anxiety. They display contradictory behaviors that make no evolutionary sense. Yesterday, I watched one of them spend 3 hours carefully nursing a damaged maintenance drone back to functionality. This morning, that same human broke the arm of a Craxian warrior who had challenged them with their bare hands. Velox's antennae twitched. And that's precisely why the Council is concerned. We've never encountered a species quite like them. Zaxtal pulled up her latest data compilation on the nearby holoscreen. Their physical capabilities are unremarkable at first glance. Average strength for their size, no natural weapons, limited sensory capacity. But their endurance, she shuddered. They can pursue prey for days without rest. They heal from injuries that would kill most species, and their cognitive adaptability is off the charts. Below them, Dr. Chen was now explaining something to her companions, gesturing enthusiastically. The other humans laughed. That strange, melodic sound that still sent shivers through Zaxtal's nerve clusters. But what truly disturbs me, Zaxtal continued, is their emotional spectrum. Most species have clear emotional states tied to survival needs. Humans, they can experience multiple, conflicting emotions simultaneously. They can love and hate the same thing. They can laugh in the face of death. They can show mercy to enemies and brutality to threats against their loved ones. The Grand Arbiter moved closer to the window. Tell me about the incident in Lab Section 7. Zaxtal's colors shifted to a deep blue of remembered fear. 3 days ago, one of our containment fields failed. A juvenile Nexus beast escaped, one of the most dangerous predators we studied. Every other species fled. The humans, they moved toward it. They worked together without speaking, using tools and improvised weapons. They didn't kill it. They subdued it, treated its injuries, and returned it to containment. They showed no fear, Grand Arbiter. No fear at all. And afterward, they went to their recreational area and had what they call a pizza party to celebrate. They treated the whole incident as some sort of entertainment. Velox's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. The Council has received reports from 17 different worlds now. Humans are appearing everywhere, establishing colonies in environments we considered uninhabitable. They're trading, building, forming relationships with species we thought incompatible with any form of cooperation. And yes, occasionally fighting with a ferocity that terrifies even the warrior races. Zaxtal focused her primary eyes on the Grand Arbiter. What are we going to do about them? Do. My dear xenobiologist, we're going to invite them to join the Galactic Council. Her chromatophores flashed in shock. But they're dangerous, unpredictable. Yes, and that's exactly why we need them. Every other species in the Council evolved to fill a specific niche. Humans, they create their own niches. They reshape their environment instead of simply adapting to it. They're capable of both extraordinary destruction and unprecedented creation. Below them, Dr. Chen had produced a small device and was showing the others something that made them gasp in wonder. Zaxtal's instruments detected increased endorphin levels in all 3 humans. But how can we trust them? She asked. Velox's response sent a chill through her central nervous system. We can't. That's what makes them perfect. In all our millennia of space exploration, we've never encountered a species that could keep itself in check. Other predator species need external controls. Humans, they created art and law and philosophy. They wage war against themselves to prevent greater wars. They acknowledge their own capacity for darkness and actively choose to walk in light. As if to emphasize his point, one of the humans below reached out to catch a falling maintenance drone, a purely instinctive act to prevent damage to someone else's property. The same hands that could break bones now cradled the machine with surprising care. Watch them closely, Zaxtel, Velox said as he turned to leave. Document everything. Because we're not just observing a new species, we're witnessing the evolution of the galaxy itself. Humans aren't the strongest, fastest, or most technologically advanced species we've encountered. But they might just be the most important. As the Grand Arbiter departed, Zaxtel returned to her observations, her own species' characteristic pragmatism warring with a new emotion she couldn't quite classify. Was it fear? Fascination? Perhaps this was how humans felt all the time. Multiple, layered reactions to a complex universe. The thought both terrified and intrigued her. Below, Dr. Chen looked up suddenly, directly at the observation window, and smiled. Zaxtal's instruments registered no hostility in the gesture, but her threat assessment protocols activated anyway. Because that was the true terror of humans. You could never quite be sure what they would do next, but you could be certain it would be something remarkable. Emergency Report #2187. Galactic Council Special Committee on Human Integration. Filed by Senior Observer Krevnak. Classification: Urgent. The humans have done it again. When the Desrathi plague struck the mining colony on Epsilon VI, we expected it to be a containment operation. Standard protocol: quarantine the infected, document the casualties, sterilize the site. That's how we've handled every major outbreak for the past 3 millennia. Instead, we witnessed something that has the entire council in an uproar. The humans not only survived, they adapted. I arrived with the emergency response team expecting to find a ghost colony. The Desrathi plague is renowned for its 100% mortality rate among carbon-based life forms. What we found instead were humans going about their daily routines, many displaying plague symptoms, but otherwise functional. Dr. Elena Martinez, the colony's chief medical officer, explained it to me while coughing up the characteristic black fluid that normally indicates final stage infection. "Oh, this," she said, wiping her mouth. "Yeah, it's pretty nasty. But we figured out that if we keep our core temperature elevated and maintain constant movement, the virus can't complete its life cycle. So we installed heat lamps everywhere and started a colony-wide dance marathon." She wasn't joking. The entire mining facility had been converted into what they called a plague rave. Infected humans were dancing, exercising, or simply walking in circles, maintaining the elevated body temperature that prevented the virus from overwhelming their systems. They had turned their recreation area into a makeshift nightclub, complete with pulsing lights and rhythmic sound patterns. The trick, Dr. Martinez continued, was realizing that the virus needs a stable environment to replicate. So we decided to be unstable. She laughed. Actually laughed. About finding a way to survive something that had wiped out entire civilizations. But it gets worse, or better, depending on your perspective. By the time our quarantine ships arrive, the humans hadn't just survived the plague. They had weaponized their own adaptation. They had isolated the compounds their bodies produced while fighting the infection and synthesized a treatment. Not just for themselves, but one that could work for any species. We figured since we were going to be sick anyway, Dr. Martinez explained, we might as well make our suffering useful. Every infected person here is basically a walking laboratory. The implications are staggering. In less than 1 standard month, these humans turned one of the deadliest diseases in galactic history into what they called a manageable condition. They did it without advanced medical facilities, using mining equipment repurposed into medical analyzers, and with half their population literally dancing to stay alive. But what truly disturbs me is their attitude about the whole situation. They treated it like a challenge, almost like entertainment. They created what they called plague fashion, protective gear decorated with luminescent fungi from the deeper mines. They composed songs about their symptoms. They turned their struggle for survival into what they termed a party. During my interview with Colony Administrator Chen, he told me something that I believe the Council needs to consider carefully. Humans don't just adapt. He said, we make adaptation fun. Because if you're going to have to do something to survive, you might as well enjoy it. This is beyond simple survival. This is the kind of adaptation that changes environments, that reshapes the very nature of threats. The humans didn't just survive the plague. They changed the rules of what survival means. The warrior clans of Drachnid are already demanding access to human biological data, fascinated by their ability to function while infected. The Science Consortium of the Seven Systems has petitioned for permanent human representatives in their medical division. And the Preservers? The Preservers are terrified. Because what do you do with a species that treats deadly plagues as an opportunity for innovation? How do you classify beings that respond to mortal threats by creating art and music? What are the long-term implications of a race that doesn't just overcome challenges, but transforms them into advantages? The humans have a saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I used to think this was just another of their curious idioms. Now I understand it's not philosophy. It's a biological imperative. They don't just survive. They optimize their survival into something entirely new. Recommendation: immediate revision of all human threat assessment protocols. They're not just adapting to their environment. They're teaching other species how to adapt. This may be either the greatest breakthrough or the greatest threat to galactic stability we've ever encountered. Personal note: during my final interview, Dr. Martinez invited me to what she called a recovery party, once the plague burns itself out. When I asked why they would celebrate something so horrific, she said, because we lived, of course, and life should be celebrated. I'm beginning to understand why the old ones warned us about letting humans into our part of the galaxy. Not because they're destructive. Plenty of species are destructive. No, humans are dangerous because they make survival look like an art form, and they're eager to teach their techniques to anyone willing to learn. The plague never stood a chance. I'm no longer certain anything does. End report. Addendum. They're calling it the Dance Plague Protocol now. It's being implemented on 7 other worlds. The humans think this is hilarious. The Preservers are having fits. And somewhere, I suspect, the universe itself is wondering what it unleashed when it created a species that responds to deadly viruses by starting a dance party. Combat Analyst Log. Subject: Human Military Medical Unit 227. Location: Frontier World Kepler 189 bits. Observer: War Sage Kixel of the Valaxian Empire. I was sent to observe human combat medics in action. What I witnessed defies all military logic. The scenario began when a mixed-species colony came under attack from swarm raiders. Standard procedure across the galaxy is simple. Warriors fight, healers heal, and each stays within their designated role. The humans. They do both, simultaneously. I watched as combat medic Sarah O'Connor charged into heavy fire to reach a wounded Centaurian child. The same hands that had just snapped a swarm drone's exoskeleton like kindling were suddenly performing microsurgery in the middle of a battlefield. Her combat suit was covered in both enemy ichor and medical supplies. The trick, she told me later, while stitching up a plasma burn on a grateful Valaxian warrior, it's to remember that fighting and healing come from the same place: the desire to protect. Her words were interrupted by another wave of swarm drones. I watched in fascination as she secured her patient in a makeshift shelter, then proceeded to engage 3 attackers with ruthless efficiency. The speed at which she switched between nurturing healer and lethal warrior was terrifying. More terrifying was how natural it seemed to her. The entire human medical unit operated this way. They moved through the battlefield like a force of nature, stopping to perform complex medical procedures one moment, engaging in brutal combat the next. Their battle cry, first, do no harm, was immediately followed by, unless there's no other choice. During a brief respite in the fighting, I interviewed their commanding officer, Major David Chen. In ancient times on Earth, he explained while cleaning both medical instruments and weapons, many of our healers were also warriors. They carried staffs that bore twin serpents, symbols of both medicine and venom. We've just updated the concept. The Major paused to call in a precision strike on a swarm hive, then immediately returned to preparing wound cleaning solutions. Every combat medic carries two oaths in their heart, he continued. The oath to heal and the oath to protect. Sometimes healing means fighting so others don't have to. But what truly unnerved me was their efficiency in both roles. These weren't simply warriors who knew field medicine or doctors who could fight. They were something else entirely. A perfect synthesis of healer and warrior that my species would consider a philosophical impossibility. I observed medic Jack Torres during what they called a hot extraction. He ran into an active firefight, carrying a wounded Archean twice his size. When swarm drones blocked his path, he didn't hesitate. The precision with which he shifted his patient to a safe position, eliminated 3 threats with his sidearm, then immediately resumed emergency treatment was unsettling. You have to compartmentalize, Torres explained afterward, while delicately reconstructing a damaged neural pathway in the Archean's secondary brain. But not too much. The fighting informs the healing informs the fighting. They're two sides of the same coin. The statistics from this single engagement are staggering. 47 lives saved through emergency battlefield medicine. 89 confirmed enemy kills. 12 simultaneous surgeries performed under fire. 3 new emergency medical techniques developed mid-battle. 1 improvised explosive device created from medical supplies. They call this aggressive pharmacy. But perhaps most disturbing was their ability to maintain perfect emotional clarity through it all. I watched O'Connor comfort a dying swarm drone after the battle, providing palliative care to the same species she had been efficiently eliminating minutes before. Every life has value, she said when I questioned this behavior. Sometimes you have to take life to save life. That doesn't mean you stop respecting it. This is the true paradox of humans, their capacity to hold such contradictions not just in their minds, but in their very actions. They can deal death with one hand while preserving life with the other, and they see no conflict in this. The swarm retreated after 6 hours of engagement. The human medical unit had suffered no casualties, saved hundreds of lives, and eliminated a significant enemy force. As they regrouped, I observed them engaging in what they called post-action care, treating their own wounds, counseling each other through combat stress, and even sharing jokes about their dual nature. What do you call a combat medic who runs out of bandages? Torres asked while sterilizing his instruments. Someone who's about to get really creative with zip ties and duct tape. The others laughed. They laughed, standing in a field of battle, surrounded by the evidence of both their healing and their violence. Major Chen noticed my confusion. You think it's strange that we can be both healers and warriors? He asked. What's strange is thinking you can be only one or the other. The universe deals in both creation and destruction. We've just learned to channel both. As I compile this report, I'm forced to reconsider everything I thought I knew about combat and medicine. The humans have created something new. Warriors who heal, healers who fight, and both who do so with a level of psychological integration that should be impossible. The most frightening part, they're teaching these techniques to other species. The next generation of galactic peacekeepers may all be combat medics, trained in the human tradition of healing and harm, protection and destruction, all guided by an ethical framework that somehow makes sense of these contradictions. End log. Personal addendum. During my final interview, O'Connor invited me to what she called a celebration of life, a gathering where they would honor both those they saved and those they had to fight. When I asked how they could celebrate both, she smiled and said, "Because understanding both is what makes us human. I'm beginning to understand why the galaxy both fears and needs them." Field Research Log. Project: Human Endurance Study. Location: Deep Space Recovery Mission, Sector 117. Researcher: Kvex Prime, Xenobiological Behavior Specialist. They never stop. That's the conclusion of my 47-day observation of the Human Deep Space Recovery Team, Relentless. I was assigned to document their attempt to rescue a stranded hive mind colony ship. Every other species had declared the mission impossible. The humans called it Tuesday. The colony ship had been caught in a temporal anomaly, stretched across 3 different time streams. Standard rescue protocols were useless. The architects themselves had declared it a lost cause. Then the humans arrived. Impossible just means no one's done it yet, Captain Maya Rodriguez told me as she studied the temporal readings for the 18th straight hour. She hadn't slept in 3 days, surviving on what they call coffee, a stimulant that should have killed any rational species. But humans, I've learned, are not rational. They approached the impossible mission like their ancient ancestors approached hunting, with relentless, methodical persistence. When direct approaches failed, they tried indirect ones. When technology couldn't solve the problem, they innovated new solutions. When those solutions failed, they combined failed approaches in new ways until something worked. I watched Chief Engineer James Chen work for 36 hours straight, fail, sleep for 2 hours, then immediately return to work. When I suggested he take more rest, he laughed. "Sleep is for people who finished the job," he said, his hand steady despite the exhaustion, as he recalibrated temporal stabilizers for the 12th time. The truly frightening part wasn't their individual endurance, it was their coordination. They worked in shifts, but not like other species do. Where others would stop at designated times, humans simply rotated. There was never a moment, not one single moment in 47 days, when at least one human wasn't working on the problem. They called it passing the baton, a reference to an ancient Earth sport where runners would hand off a stick without ever stopping the forward momentum. That's what humans do with problems. They never lose momentum. On day 23, I witnessed something that still haunts me. The team had failed to breach the temporal barrier for the 189th time. Any other species would have retreated, regrouped, perhaps admitted defeat. The humans, they held what they called a failure party. "Every failure teaches us something," Lieutenant Sarah Chang explained while analyzing data from their latest attempt. "We've now learned 189 ways that don't work. That means we're 189 steps closer to the way that will work." They celebrated their failures. They learned from them. They kept going. The hive mind representatives watching the rescue attempt were disturbed by this behavior. "They are acting against self-preservation instincts," one observed. "This continued expenditure of energy in the face of inevitable failure is irrational. But that's what makes humans terrifying. They don't accept inevitable. They don't recognize impossible. They just keep going." On day 35, they had a breakthrough. Or rather, they had failed enough times to piece together a solution from their failures. They called it temporal triangulation, using the very time distortions that trapped the colony ship to create a rescue corridor. "Think of it like surfing," Rodriguez explained, though I had no reference for this Earth activity. "You don't fight the wave. You use its energy to get where you need to go." The rescue itself was another display of human persistence. When the initial approach failed, they adjusted. When equipment failed, they improvised. When team members became exhausted, others stepped in seamlessly, always moving forward, never stopping. On day 47, they succeeded. The colony ship was rescued, Its 15,000 inhabitants saved from an eternity of temporal distortion. The humans celebrated for exactly 6 hours, then began preparing for their next impossible mission. During the debriefing, I asked Captain Rodriguez how they maintained their determination in the face of such overwhelming odds. Her response chilled my primary nervous system. "You know how our ancestors hunted, right? We didn't have to be faster than our prey. We just had to outlast them, keep following until they couldn't run anymore. That's still how we hunt problems. We don't have to be smarter than the problem, or stronger, or better equipped. We just have to be more persistent. The universe will give up before we do." The implications of this mindset are staggering. Other species pursue goals until they become too costly or difficult. Humans, they pursue goals until they're achieved, regardless of cost or difficulty. They don't recognize loss of resources, time, or energy as valid reasons to stop. More disturbing still is how they're teaching this mindset to other species. The hive mind representatives who witnessed the rescue have already requested human persistence training for their own rescue teams. The architects are studying human problem-solving methodologies. Even the collective is interested in what they call human-style determination. As I conclude this field study, I'm forced to add a warning to the Galactic database. Never assume humans will give up. Never count on their exhaustion or demoralization. They are persistent hunters of solutions, and they will chase a problem across time and space until they solve it. Sci-Fi Exploration. Galactic Council Summit on Human Classification. Final Assessment. Author: High Observer Encylate. Status: Urgent. After a millennium of studying species across the galaxy, we thought we understood the spectrum of intelligent life. Then we met humans. Today, I must report our most disturbing conclusion. Humans are not what we thought they were. They're worse. And better. I write this as I observe a human child playing with a young Vraxian war beast in the embassy gardens. The war beast, a creature bred for combat, capable of tearing through battleship hull plating, is gently retrieving a thrown ball, wagging its deadly tail. The human child's laughter echoes across the garden. And the war beast, responding to this sound, becomes even gentler. This scene encapsulates everything that makes humans the most terrifying species we've encountered. Their ability to transform anything they touch. Consider the evidence. We've watched them turn deadly plagues into medical breakthroughs. They transformed war beasts into companions. They converted poison into medicine, weapons into tools, enemies into allies. But what truly terrifies us is not their ability to transform their environment. It's their ability to transform themselves. During yesterday's council session, Ambassador Sarah Chen presented Earth's historical records. We watched in horror as humans went from primitive tool users to spacefaring civilization in what amounts to an evolutionary blink of an eye. But it wasn't their technological progress that frightened us. It was their emotional evolution. Humans, Chen explained, don't just adapt physically or technologically. We adapt emotionally. We learn to feel new things. This concept, emotional evolution, is unprecedented in galactic history. Other species have fixed emotional ranges. The warrior clans feel aggression and honor. The hivemans feel unity and purpose. The architects feel order and chaos. But humans? They feel everything. And then they create new feelings we don't even have words for. They call it emotional intelligence, the ability to not only experience emotions but to understand, manipulate, and even create them. They can love their enemies while fighting them. They can hate something and protect it simultaneously. They can feel joy in sorrow, find peace in chaos, and create beauty from destruction. A human scientist recently explained to me their concept of sublimation, the ability to transform negative impulses into positive outcomes. When I asked why they don't simply suppress negative emotions like other species, she laughed. Suppression, Dr. Emily Zhang said, that's like putting a lid on a reactor. Eventually, it explodes. We prefer to channel the energy. Turn rage into determination. Transform fear into curiosity. Convert grief into creation. This is what makes them so dangerous. They don't just survive trauma, they grow from it. They don't just face their fears, they turn them into strengths. Every human is a perpetual motion machine of emotional and psychological evolution. Last week, we witnessed a human diplomatic team resolve a 1,000-year conflict between the Sword Worlds and the Merchant Princes. Their method? They made both sides feel new emotions. They created what they called empathy bridges, technological and psychological tools that allowed each species to experience the other's emotional reality. The problem wasn't that they couldn't agree, explained Chief Negotiator Michael Okonjo. The problem was they couldn't feel each other's truth. Once they could feel it, agreement was inevitable. But perhaps most terrifying is their ability to share this emotional evolution with other species. The Vraxian war beast playing in the garden isn't just obeying commands, it has learned to feel joy. The hivemans who worked with human emergency services haven't just learned new protocols. They've learned to feel individual concern while maintaining collective consciousness. Humans are emotional terraformers. They reshape the psychological landscape of every species they encounter, not through force or design, but through simple interaction. They feel, and in feeling, they teach others to feel. During the final council session, I asked Ambassador Chen what humans want from the galaxy. Her response should be entered into every warning database we have. "We want what we've always wanted," she said. "To understand, to explore, to grow, to feel, to help others do the same. We want to learn every story, feel every feeling, solve every puzzle, right every wrong. We want to take this vast, beautiful, terrifying universe and make it more vast, more beautiful, and maybe a little less terrifying." When I pointed out that this was an impossible task, she smiled. That human smile that every species now recognizes as a sign of both comfort and warning. Impossible just means we haven't done it yet. Final recommendation to the Council. We cannot classify humans using our traditional species indexes. They are neither predator nor prey, neither builders nor destroyers, neither warriors nor peacekeepers. They are all of these things, and none of them. Humans are a catalyst species. They change everything they touch, and they cannot stop touching things. They will not be contained, cannot be controlled, and must not be underestimated. The child in the garden has now taught the war beasts to play dead, a disturbing game where a living weapon pretends to be harmless. Both creatures appear to be enjoying this mockery of mortality. This, perhaps, is the most human thing of all. Their ability to dance on the edge of darkness while laughing. We must accept them into the galactic community not because they are safe, but because they are necessary. They are the chaos factor, the element of change, the species that will not stop until they have transformed the entire galaxy into something new. They are, in the end, exactly what they appear to be, creatures who can break worlds or heal them, who can end civilizations or elevate them, who can destroy or create with equal passion. They are beautiful monsters, and they are now part of our galaxy. End report.